Today we're going to talk about immersion in video games and how important it is. Is it that important? Does it just matter if a game is fun and how immersive it is has no significance? Or does lack of immersion ruin the game's fun factor and makes it less enjoyable overall? In order to answer this question, we will be focusing on two games in particular: Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Call of Duty World War II. Two of the most anticipated games of 2017. We're going to be focusing on those games in order to answer that question because both games have a little bit of controversy regarding immersion. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the controversy regarding Call of Duty World War II, and we will get into that later. But first, let's talk about Star Wars Battlefront 2. There's been a lot of positive reception so far after we've gotten the gameplay from E3. EA seems to have righted a lot of the wrongs of the first Battlefront game. And the first Battlefront game, the main problem was the lack of content. There were so many missing features that we knew and loved from the Battlefront series. And such as the prequel content, there being no prequel content in the original Battlefront. There just being a lack of features overall, no space battles, none of these other things. But DICE seems to have been fixing that problem in Battlefront 2 and seems to be a lot more of a complete experience than the original Battlefront, especially since there's an actual single-player campaign. So that's why I'm actually very excited for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I am very much looking forward to the game, and I will most likely buy the game, especially since the DLC is apparently going to be free. There's going to be no season pass or premium or anything like that. So that's good news. No matter what your opinion is on EA, there's some people who are like, oh, it's still an EA product, so I'll never buy it, because there are a lot of people that are like that. But the way I see it is that you should reward EA for actually doing something right, because if you just boycott the game anyway, no matter what they do, then they're never going to improve. So I think it's important to reward developers and publishers for actually doing right for the community and not just being petty about it, being like, oh, it's EA, so I'm never going to buy the game. I just think that's a very stupid mentality to have. But anyway, I'm kind of veering off track a little bit. There is a bit of controversy regarding Battlefront 2, though. And it might be an insignificant one to some people, but if you actually ask the Star Wars Battlefront community about it, there actually is a very split, there are very mixed emotions about this. So let's talk about that. So anybody who's seen Star Wars Battlefront 2 footage at E3 would notice that there is Rey from the sequel trilogy fighting Darth Maul, who is from the prequel trilogy. Now, in case anyone knows absolutely dick about Star Wars, let me try to explain this to you. The events between Star Wars Episode 1 and Star Wars Episode 7, it's a pretty fucking long time. I'm not sure the exact number, but I'm pretty sure it's around 60, 70 years, something like that, right? So, obviously, Darth Maul and Rey were not around during the same time period. So, a lot of people are very unhappy about this, saying that it breaks immersion because you're having Rey fight on Naboo, which is the setting for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, when she obviously wasn't there. And the reason why people are upset about this is because they feel that it breaks immersion, having people from different eras fighting each other, otherwise known as cross-era gameplay. I saw a poll on Twitter that another YouTuber featured on their video talking about this, and it said that 60% of players supported cross-era gameplay and 40% of players did not, which is a pretty split decision. It's a pretty divided issue, 60-40. So a lot of people are unhappy about this. And I'm going to share my thoughts about this pretty soon. But before we get into that, let's talk about the definition of immersion, just in case anybody may be confused, or I just want to give what I think immersion is, just so we have a definition out there to have a real discussion here, so everyone is on the same page and knows what I'm talking about. I personally measure immersion as how much a game can make the player feel that they are actually in the setting in which the game takes place. So when we're talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2, the game's job is to make you feel that you are actually in the Battle of Naboo, which took place in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Or, in the original Battlefront's case, the 2015 EA Battlefront, make you feel that you're on the Battle for Endor, the Battle on Hoth, all these other significant battles that actually took place in the, whether it was the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, or the sequel trilogy. It doesn't matter. DICE even said themselves that they were trying to recreate battles that took place within the Star Wars universe. So, with that being said, it's very, very, very problematic that Rey is a part of the battle on Theed, which is the battle in Naboo. And I think that's a problem. I know a lot of people think that cross-era gameplay is okay, but I don't think it is. Especially in battles in which heroes from different eras weren't present in. It totally breaks the immersion. It's very noticeable to anyone who isn't a Star Wars fan. It might not be noticeable to them, and there's probably a significant portion of people who aren't necessarily Star Wars fans, but they're frag heads, they love FPS games, so they'll pick the game up. And for those people, it wouldn't matter. But to people who actually are familiar with the Star Wars universe, people who actually care about how immersive a game is, it would definitely make the game a lot less fun, and it would sort of ruin the experience a little bit. Now, I know video games are supposed to be fun, and I totally understand that. In Star Wars Battlefront 2, you know, the Battlefront 2 that wasn't made by EA, the old one, they had cross-era gameplay, but only in one game mode, in which it was heroes versus villains. So you had Darth Maul, Darth Vader, Count Dooku, the Emperor, and all the other villains, versus all the heroes like Han Solo, Princess Leia, Obi-Wan, Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker, and all the heroes that you play as. I think that's a fine instance of cross-era gameplay, because it's obviously separate from lore. It's separate from the actual battles that took place. But having Rey on Naboo just makes no fucking sense. I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever, and I think that they should not have that at all. Because Darth Maul was actually there in the movie. Rey was not. Rey was probably a child, a very young child, when that movie was filmed. So, yeah, no. Rey being on that, in that battle, just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I'm okay with cross-era gameplay if you make a separate mode out of it, but if you include it on everything, and if you include it on battles that actually took place in the movies, then it's a problem. It's a huge problem, and it definitely breaks immersion, and that definitely can ruin your game experience. But I'm still going to get Battlefront 2 most likely. This bothers me, but not enough to be like, fuck this, I'm never going to buy this game. Because at the end of the day, you have your space battles, you have the battle droids and the clone troopers, which is something I wanted in the original Battlefront game that EA made. Because guess what? I grew up during the Clone Wars. I'm sure that might make a few of you guys feel old, and some other of you guys feel young because, the last prequel movie was made in 2005, and that's 12 years ago, so a lot of people might either not have been born back then or won't even remember that time period. So yeah, it's crazy to think that there are people who didn't even grow up during the prequels. That's just crazy to even think about, but it's probably a reality. I'm sure a significant number of my viewers weren't even around when the Clone Wars happened, when the prequel trilogy happened, the Phantom Menace, and Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. very unfavorable opinions for those movies, but I personally love them because I grew up with them. That's just how it goes sometimes. But either way, it's not going to completely ruin my experience, but it will definitely affect it in a negative way, for sure. But I think we pretty much get the gist when it comes to Battlefront 2, that having different people from different eras fighting each other, it might be okay in certain game modes that are just supposed to be fun, but when it's game modes that are actually specifically made to recreate the battles, that definitely breaks immersion, and that definitely makes the game much less fun, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the original Battlefront game, which was to recreate important battles that took place in the Star Wars universe, and I'm sure that's still their goal, which I think is a very, which is why I think it's a very interesting decision to put Rey, an Episode 7 hero, in an Episode 1 battle. I just think that's completely fucking retarded, in my opinion. But I think we're kind of beating on a dead horse at this point. I don't want to focus too much time on just Battlefront 2, because I want to move on to Call of Duty World War II. I don't think I've made a video yet specifically dedicated to World War II, or even where I've talked about World War II, because I just came back on YouTube. I've been gone for a while, and during that period is when Call of Duty World War II was announced and revealed and all that shit. So I didn't get the chance to share my thoughts about World War II. But, I don't know, for about a month since the game was revealed, I was very indifferent towards it. I wasn't following the hype train like all the other people were, because it's World War II, it's nostalgia, because, World at War. I wasn't buying into it, just because the game doesn't have jetpacks and exosuits and futuristic bullshit doesn't mean the game's going to be good. So, I honestly felt nothing towards the game. I was very indifferent towards it. I didn't think it was going to be great. I was very skeptical about it, and I still am, even more so now. But we'll get into that. But I also didn't think that it looked like shit like Infinite Warfare did. So I think by default it's going to be a much better game than Infinite Warfare was. But when I saw the gameplay of it, it kind of reminded me of it looked just like Advanced Warfare with a World War II skin. It was the same art style, same movement, sort of, without the exo jump, of course. But that's to be expected because it is Sledgehammer making the game, after all. So, I saw the gameplay, I saw the multiplayer gameplay, wasn't too impressed by it. So, again, I was very indifferent towards it. But then, some more information was revealed about the game, more specific details regarding the character creation in the multiplayer and other aspects of the multiplayer that are actually pretty important, that aren't necessarily related to the gameplay. So let's talk about those two things, because those two things are very controversial. Very controversial. So let's talk about probably the more ridiculous scenario. So, apparently, in the Call of Duty World War II multiplayer, they allow you to play as a black female Nazi. You can be a black woman fighting for the Nazis in the multiplayer. When I first heard about that, I didn't even know how to react to it. I was like, are you fucking serious? Are you really fucking serious right now? You can have a black female Nazi in a game that's advertised as being historically accurate? Are you fucking kidding me? Are you seriously fucking kidding me? They literally advertised the game as historically accurate, historically accurate, historically accurate. Those are the two words that they've been using to describe the game. And you can be a black female Nazi. Does that really make you feel like you're in World War II and you're fighting Nazis when you see when you gun down a fucking black woman with a fucking swastika? Oh wait, no, she doesn't have a swastika because they took away the fucking swastikas from fucking Call of Duty World War II. Historically accurate World War II. No swastika. They removed the swastika from the fucking game. Are you fucking kidding me? Oh my fucking god. When I heard those two things, because I heard those two things, like, around the same time. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, first you have black female Nazis running around, which makes no fucking sense, which totally destroys the idea that you're part of World War II, that they're recreating World War II, when you have black female fucking Nazis running around. Like, I don't fucking understand that. Oh, because, you know, you can create your character, you know, you need to have more customization in the multiplayer. I'm sure it's something along those lines. I'm sure they're going to say that. But we don't want to limit the user's creativity in creating their character. Okay, well, here's a way to solve that problem. You can create different characters for different factions. You can create a Japanese soldier or a Nazi soldier. They're completely separate. But no women should be in the fucking game. I'm sorry to say, but they weren't there. They weren't in World War II. They were medics. That's pretty much all they were. They weren't in the battlefield. Women were just allowed in the battlefield a few fucking years ago, so don't tell me they were at World War II. Don't honestly try to make me believe that. So women should not be in the fucking game at all. I'm sorry to say that. They should be in the campaign. They should be featured in the campaign. I don't see why not. If you're trying to be historically accurate, you should mention the women's roles in World War II. I don't see any problem with that. But they weren't there. They weren't in the battlefield. Not a single woman was in the battlefield during World War II. Maybe a few resistance fighters, but not actual soldiers that were especially part of the Third Reich. Yeah, okay. You had so much black women that were fighting for Hitler. I'm sure there were. Don't even get me started with that. That's just that's insanity. And then you go ahead and remove the swastika from the Nazis? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, because we don't want. I saw the interview from one of the creators of the game. Said, you know, we have to feature it in the single player, but we don't want to offend people, you know, who were affected by the Holocaust from the multiplayer. We just don't want to do that because it will remind them and blah 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 blah, and it's disrespectful to the people who were victims of the Holocaust. That's fucking bullshit. First of all, if you actually think about it, it's actually more offensive to victims of the Holocaust to remove the swastika than to put it back in, and I'm going to tell you guys why. This whole idea of removing flags because the flags are offensive is stupid. Because I've actually met a few Holocaust survivors, okay? I've actually got the opportunity to meet a few of them. I was in Holocaust literature class sophomore year of high school, and it was actually a pretty good experience. I went to the Holocaust Museum in the city, and they actually had a Holocaust survivor go out and speak, and I actually got to see that, and I actually got to see a Holocaust survivor. There was also a different Holocaust survivor that actually came to my school and talked about their experience as well. But one thing, whenever you hear Holocaust survivors speaking, they always say one thing, whether it's, I remember I was reading Night by Elie Wiesel, I was reading other works by Holocaust survivors, and any, you know, video documented interviews from people who survived the Holocaust, they all pretty much say the same thing, that we need to make sure this never happens again. So, by censoring the swastika, does that really accomplish your goal? You know, oh, you think that, oh yeah, by censoring it, you know, you censor the Nazis, that's a good thing. But at the same time, by removing the swastika, you're kind of implying that the Germans weren't Nazis. Because you have the original German flag symbol that replaces the swastika in the multiplayer. So you're kind of implying that these Germans, the Germans in World War II, weren't actually Nazis. And I'm sure some people are going to be like, well, it's just the multiplayer. The multiplayer isn't supposed to be realistic. So I'm like, okay, first of all, who gives a fuck about single player when you're talking about Call of Duty? How many people actually give a fuck about single player? Not that many people do. I don't know a single person who buys Call of Duty just for the single player. Nobody does. Most people just buy it for the multiplayer or the zombies or both. So to be like, oh yeah, we want to create a historically accurate game in World War II just for the single player, but the multiplayer can be as ridiculous as you want. They're probably going to have supply drops with stupid fucking skins and all this other bullshit. And it's not going to feel like World War II. It's going to be a fucking joke. And it's going to completely ruin immersion. It's going to make the game feel like a fucking joke. Call of Duty World War II? Yeah, okay. I'm sure there were fucking, you know, fucking clown noses and all these fucking weird fucking costumes that you get in the supply drops and these fucking camos, these flashy, colorful camos. Yeah, I'm sure that was in World War II. I'm sure the Allies were storming Normandy with fucking rainbow assault rifles and fucking weird-ass fucking face paint. And the Germans who were defending themselves at Normandy weren't actually Nazis, and there were black women defending the Third Reich from the Allied invaders. I'm sure there were. I'm sure that's what happened. So don't criticize Sledgehammer for doing this. Do not criticize Sledgehammer. They're trying to create a historically accurate experience for you guys. Anyone who knows basic history would know that, yes, there actually were black women in World War II, and they were fighting for the Nazis. It was some kind of, I guess, a deal that if they fought, then they wouldn't be placed in the concentration camp and burned in an oven or some shit. There, you know, the Third Reich was a very inclusive regime. There was many different soldiers from many different races that were fighting for the Nazis. The Nazis were very inclusive. They promoted tolerance and love across the world. And that's the only reason why they wanted to conquer the world. They only wanted to conquer the world to spread love and peace. And to spread equality. There's no other reason why they invaded Russia, why they invaded most of Europe. They only did that because those countries were violating human rights, and they were very racist. The Nazis were only trying to save them from their bigotry. Why else would they enlist black women in the Third Reich? That obviously proves that the Nazis weren't that bad. And, you know, people always view the swastika as a terrible symbol of Nazis. And you know, people always associate the swastika with Hitler and concentration camps and mass murder and genocide. But if you actually look at historically accurate Call of Duty World War II, they tell you that the swastika actually wasn't in the game. That the swastika wasn't actually in World War II. The more you know, the better, right? No, fuck you. Seriously. Fuck you, Sledgehammer. You're gonna, you know, you guys think that you're making more money by having, you know, an inclusive bullshit in the game to cater to SJWs, but it's gonna actually hurt a lot of your sales in the long run. I don't plan on buying this fucking game. I was indifferent towards the game before, but now I'm like, fuck you. You know, you advertise this as a historically accurate depiction of World War II, yet you have black female fucking Nazis and no fucking swastika. Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, fuck you. Seriously, fuck you, Sledgehammer. I'm not buying your bullshit. You can fuck off with your SJW fucking nonsense. I don't want it. I don't want that bullshit to be part of my game experience. I don't. When I saw the multiplayer trailer and I saw a female screaming like "cover me" or whatever, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You're fucking kidding me? They actually had the female soldiers in the trailer for Call of Duty World War II. This isn't sexist. You know, in Infinite Warfare or Modern Warfare or any other game that takes place during a modern setting, of course women should be in the game. Because they were actually there. They actually fight in the battlefield, and they're actually allowed to fight. Back then they weren't allowed to fight, and they weren't in World War II. You know, people are going to try to depict this as a sexist comment to make, that you're trashing the inclusion of African-American women, and women in general, in a video game. You must be a sexist for speaking against that. Well, the only problem is that the game takes place 70 years ago, and women in the battlefield weren't even a thought. women in the workplace weren't even a thought. Women being able to vote was a recent event back then. It was maybe like 20 years ago that women were allowed to vote during that time period. So don't tell me that they were fucking fighting in World War II, and that it's not a big deal if they're included in the game, even though they advertise themselves as historically accurate. We're making a historically accurate experience for you guys to enjoy. We're trying to recreate World War II for you guys because, you know, that's what we're trying to do. Except that's not what you're trying to do. You guys are trying to include SJW bullshit, and beyond that, which is something people aren't talking about. People probably didn't think of this yet, but they're gonna have these fucking supply drops because there hasn't been a single Call of Duty game without supply drops since Sledgehammer's last game, Advanced Warfare. So thank you, Sledgehammer, for including supply drops. You guys are so great. And these supply drops are going to come in, and it's going to be fucking ridiculous. Just like how the supply drops ruined Call of Duty 4, they're going to ruin Call of Duty World War II. If I want my Call of Duty World War II fix, I'm just going to go back to World at War. I can deal with the hackers, and I can deal with that bullshit, because even with all that crap, it's still more immersive than having black female fucking Nazis running around.